All right. Let's call for the opening of the meeting at 8:25 p.m. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented. Seconded by Councillor Simard. Any additions? Fine. All those in favor then? Carried. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interests? None. Fine. Thank you. Delegations? None. Fine. Petitions and correspondence? First petition presented by Mrs. Francine Malt. There she is. In regards to a speed reduction on Giroux Street, your name and address, Mrs. Malt. I'm sure you'll remember that, or those details. Yes, I can even say this in Spanish if you wish. I live in 883 Giroux Street, P.O. Box 128, Rockland, Ontario, K4K, 1K6. Go ahead, Mrs. Giroux. Can I start off? Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. The reason that I'm before you here tonight is to address a petition that we circulated on Giroux Street to have people slow down to reduce the speed limit from 50 to 40. As you're all aware, this roadway is quite traveled. It's very wide. There are a lot of students that attend Sainte Trinité schools, Carrefour Jeunesse, the Rockland District High School, the high school itself, and the public school. And so this is the reason. That's the reason why I believe it would be worthwhile to reduce, or worth our while reducing the speed. There are a lot of parents that go by there on bicycle, but they have to go on the sidewalk because the speed that the cars travel at is too quickly. It's like a speed course from Patricia to Laurier. People start traveling by car and accelerate right to the end, traveling at speeds over and above 80, and the road is often used when on those times when Laurier is blocked for infrastructure work to be performed. Now, if ever there's some infrastructure work performed on Laurier Street, naturally, of course, they drive onto Giroux Street and then go on to Chenet and wind down on St. Joseph Street. Wind up there, should I say. Now, since the Morris project has been built, especially my children, when they go to my place, they notice that there's a lot of vehicular traffic. The Knights of Columbus also draw in a bit of traffic during the time in which they host activities, for example. Now, at this point in time, the speed limit is pegged at 50. That means that people will travel at 60, 70, or 80. If we lower the speed limit at 50, probably the traffic flow will decrease and people won't travel as fast. That's about all I had to say on this. Do you have any questions to ask of me? Well, when Mrs. Malt takes over, she takes over, let me tell you. Does anyone have any questions of Mrs. Malt? I'm sure she has an answer. Well, the two posts that they put up, what's the speed limit put on or posted on those posts? It's 50. Well, all of the residential streets have a 50 km an hour speed limit. That rule prevails both in Clarence as well as in Rockland. I spoke to the Public Works folks, and they told me that a 40 km an hour speed limit sign would be posted. I spoke to Mr. Roussel, who told me that if we manage to obtain this measure that we're seeking, they would put up 40 km an hour speed signs. I knocked at close to 44 doors, and 40 individuals signed the petition because they're sick and tired of grinning and bearing the traffic that's there. Especially if you go out from the corner of Giroux Street, people do not stop there. At one point in time, I was traveling in that area and I was rear-ended by a car that did not make its stop. Now, if people would slow down in that area, it would help all of our youngsters out. I'm in complete agreement with you on this, but I have to keep in mind that I also have a road or a street that has the same problem in my ward. Each and every time that we reduce traffic on one street, it reduces traffic flow and thus increases the speed of vehicles traveling on another street. Did we not commission a road or a traffic study? I know that secondary roads such as Edgar, Saint Jean, and Edwards were pegged at a 50-kilometer-an-hour limit. I don't know if I'd spoken about this to Mr. Campo Roussel. That's something I think that we should do. Instead of going one road by one road by one road, we should reduce the speed limit at those secondary schools roads to 50 kilometers an hour. But we're talking here about a well-traveled roadway. School buses travel by there, and when I went door to door during the course of my campaign, I conducted, I was told that some bus drivers had a heavy foot on the accelerator, if you know what I mean. Look, I have young children going to confessional from Saint Trinité School, and they have 5 or 6 students walking along in a row, and they have to, they have to go to the side of the sidewalk to allow cars to pass at a very high rate of speed. You see, Chenier is at 40 kilometers an hour, Saint-Joseph is at 40 kilometers an hour, Alma is at 40 kilometers an hour, and I believe that Laurence is at 40 kilometers an hour. We're talking here about a school area. I know what you're saying, ma'am. We should mandate the administration to take a look at all of the roadways, the existing roadways here in Clarence and Rockland, be they major or minor arteries or secondary roads. When I went door to door, a lot of people told me or asked me, are they going to do it to other roadways? I'm just pleading my cause for Giroux Street. When I sat at Town Council, I know that we needed to take action on this. If people, don't go by Dr. Corbeil, they travel by where I live. Let me guarantee you that Saint Joseph will be open from one end to another. Problems will dissipate. Well, they've put up a stop sign right where Avenue du Parc was, and I went by that stop sign. I didn't even know there was a stop sign there. Yeah, there should be a signage put up advising people that there's a new stop sign there. Is it that you had a heavy foot on the accelerator yourself, ma'am? Yes. I was going to address the St. Joseph's Street situation myself later on. Well, I agree with what's being said. Chenier, Saint-Laurent, Patricien have 3 schools in that vicinity. And in between Chenier and Saint-Laurent, one has difficulty to go by, especially when there's a bus going by. As Councillor Zant mentioned, we brought this to town council's attention, and we commissioned a study to determine which street should be subject to a reduction of speed limits. That will be for Brian to consider. Well, we should bring this matter back to the next committee of the whole meeting. Well, on behalf of all residents and owners, I would like to thank you for having listened to our request, and I hope you'll vote in favor to safeguard the well-being of adults, of grandchildren, and our great-great-grandchildren. So we'll come back with a further resolution to look into this at the next meeting? Yes. Yes, Mr. Darch. I appreciate what's been said up to now, Mr. Mayor, but looking at the roads in the area, stop signs, and the speeding, if you're asking that a report come back based on the request made here, it'll behoove the Infrastructure and Planning Department to follow along with that. Well, that's fine. That's fine. All right. All right. Yes. We'll try and expedite that report and bring it back to council, probably in October. Yes. So we haven't seen the report because the report similar to this was promised us a long time ago. I was told it was submitted to City Hall weeks ago. I haven't seen it myself. All right. Petition presented by Mrs. Carol Berndt in regards to Campo Crescent and Saint Jacques Street. Name and address, please. Carol Berndt, 12 Campo Crescent. I've been a resident here since 1986. I'm on Campo. I live on Campo, obviously, so I wish to read the following. We, the undersigned, residing on Campo or Saint Jacques Street, Ward 1, draw to the attention of the city the following. That the current state of Campo Crescent and Saint Jacques is getting worse. More and more puddles are being created by the amount of use on the road, and has also caused sections of crumbling asphalt to be continuously deteriorating, which is obviously unsafe for the general public and motor vehicles. It has been this way for years, even closer to decades. A simple patchwork over the years has actually worsened the condition, and it is not even a possible option where the road has crumbled into chunks of asphalt. Clarence and Rockland Council knows of this needed repair and has done nothing to secure the funding for this well-known area for the city, requiring critical attention. The residents would like the infrastructure and road repaired and leveled to reflect a better ideal for our community. The value of our homes and economic status has suffered because the roads are an absolute turnoff. I have a petition of 212 people. Fine, ma'am, thank you, perfect. So we're just hoping that something can be done. Mr. Lalonde? Yes, thank you very much. Ms. Berndt, I have to say that I had called a meeting for Ward 1 on August the 24th. We had a total of 48 people that showed up, and the majority were from Campo Street, some were from Saint-Jacques, and also Charon, as well as Heritage. And I can tell you that I did visit many, many times, and especially when the people are asking me for speed bumping or speed bumps. I mean, you say you want to remove the speed bump that we have in there because the roads are so rough in there, and I fully recognize and I agree with you, ma'am, that something has to be done. Now, I was looking at the budget that we had for the 2017 budget, and there were 2 items in there, 3 really, including the one that was turned down for the grant application. We have 2 others. One was for $271,000 and the other one $361,000. And this is why at the next meeting I'm going to bring that to the council's attention, that some of the work that could be done after discussing this matter with our engineers can be. Let me tell you that we have 85 residents on Campo Street over a distance of 486 meters. That is the length of Campo Street. And Saint-Jacques is 1,465. But the section of Saint-Jacques of which we don't have any sanitary sewers at all, they're connected like an octopus would be connecting different sections. I remember when we built a house at the corner of Edmond and Saint-Jacques, they had to change the piping of the neighbor's house, and it was going to cost $150,000 to reconnect this area. So really, the application for the grant for the project was 1.7 million. 750 was for the grant, and 981 was for the long-term debt. Now, after hiring the consultant to do some survey in there, to do some work, they turned around. They looked at the cost to rebuild the whole street from Heritage to Marillon or Laurier. It was a little over $6 million. Now, talking to the engineers, he says that there are some areas that we don't have to change the underground infrastructure. But I can tell you that on Saint-Jacques Street, from Marillon to to Raymond Street. The underground there has been there now for nearly 60 years, and last winter we had 2 broken pipes in there. And I will be discussing this a little bit further with our engineers. So really, I want to thank you for coming down and having attended the meeting, because I would also invite all of the members of council to come for a tour of this area, because, yeah, I hear some folks snicker. There is a lake there, isn't there? There is. And very often, we tend to put asphalt or perform work on other streets. There are no other streets in Clarence Rockland, paved streets, that are in that condition. There is no other street, a paved street, I'm saying, that is in that condition. Mr. Mayor, you drove around there with me. And when I say, especially in front of Jean-Guy Laviolette, that it's terrible, you can't even drive at 40. You don't need to have the speed limit pegged at 40 because you can't drive at 40. Thank you. Can we bring that back to administration to have a look at this and figure out what we can do for this year? You can certainly bring back this report. Now, the handing of this petition is timely because we're in the process of tabling a 10-year plan for you that's going to look at all of the roads, sustainable, affordable funding on our programs, and we'll be looking at these roads. There'll be a consultation period, so I think it's timely. Right now, our program is set, our funding is set for 2017, but we are just on the verge now of going into 2018 deliberations, so we will take this petition into consideration, and I'm sure that members of council, when you get the documents tonight, you're going to want to meet with us, and projects like this will be talked about. Now, I do have to indicate to you that we have substantial needs in our municipality, so the program that you're going to see is a prioritized one based on risk and affordability. But obviously, council reserves the right to amend that program as it sees fit. So we're going to give you a staff perspective on it, and we'll solicit public consultation, and then we'll go to the budget process. I just want to make sure that you're aware that we have $712,000 in the budget, not counting the 1.7 for the programming that I alluded to. Another point while they're there, because it was also brought up, was this. Now, the resurfacing. It's also in the budget, and it was dealt with at the meeting, but it was never done. So I'll be speaking to you, Mr. Boucher, about this. That's what I was told, to consult with you. Well, I believe, I don't have the budget documents in front of me, but I believe that the monies that are being referred to, the Saint-Jacques project, was broken down into 3 components. There was the road, and then there was the water, and I believe there was storm and sanitary, both a debt component, and a city share. And I think that's what you're referring to, because the entire program was conditional. And you know, we didn't receive the funding for it, but I believe you're correct. There is that money there. But we've used that as being part of the conditional funding. We'll have to take a look at that. Now, the $728,000, that was separate from the other one. In the budget, it's set down as, well, as I recall, my memory may be failing me there, but I believe there were 3 components. And they had a breakdown of debt. Well, I'll be down to see you on that because I do have a breakdown here. Mr. Keogh, have we got that? Well, it's a big number. He's pretty tired there. He's going to go on holidays pretty soon, this guy. Well, I believe that council is aware that there's a need everywhere. I could literally take your presentation and have another person, another citizen from all of our wards do the exact same presentation you did and just change street names. So it's a tough ward to win, if you will, because there's a big need, as Mr. Darch stated. So, but it will be taken into consideration. Well, I appreciate, but there is a need in regards to our area. Well, I agree, but there's the same situation that prevails in all our wards. We have to remember that there has been a lot of money put into Ward 1. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, and there should be some preference shown there for the upcoming budget talks that we'll be entering into. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Darch's recollection, it was correct, except for a potential grant that we're planning for the roadside. That was a potential CIF grant, $750,000. That was not approved. The two amounts would have been borrowed then. Yes, yes, for the water, sewer, and for the road. Other than for the grant that we did not receive. But there are separate entries in the budget. Yes, 361 and 371. Yes, three separate projects. I see. Yes. Fine. So, can we get a report on this at the next meeting? Yes. We will do everything we can. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else have a question? You're pretty quiet tonight. You'd better come up here and have your say, ma'am. Name and address, please. Marco Leonard, 1223 Campo Crescent. I'm sure, like other residents on my street and Saint-Jacques, have called to make inquiries to the city over the years, as I have. I'm sorry, I can't see your name plaque, so I don't know who's who. But I've called and spoken to whoever's responsible for the planning and the 3-year plan, the 5-year plan, and the 10-year plans. I believe it was Mr. Campo that I spoke to. And I was advised that Saint-Jacques was, was on the 3-year plan last year, and that it was going to be done this year. And I understand that there was, due to the infrastructure and the engineering report, that grant was not awarded and was not going to be realized. Now you're talking about another 10-year plan report and prioritizing that. So it concerns me that we may get bumped back. Yes, but as Mr. Darch said a moment ago, council can prioritize certain streets. Right, Mr. Mayor. And I guess that's the emphasis that I want to put. As you mentioned, there hasn't been a whole lot of work that has been done to our area. Yes, and, it's time that we have some investments made. I'd like to mention, though, that Poupard, which was in Ward 1, was redone this year. It's done now. There's a lot of work to be done there because of the ditching. Water coming from the hill and all of this was a priority because the road was a mess. And cars, as it rained a lot this year, cars would have sank. We would have had to close the road. I'd like to know what other streets in Clarence and Rockland are in this same dilemma. Well, baseline has been done. Every year there's a scratch code that's applied, as I've told you, on Old Highway 17. We're doing this during the course of a 4-year project, mostly because we've received money from the counties for roads only. We have $450,000, which goes directly to roads. They did do work. Which one was it the other day? St. Louis. That's scratch coating. Well, scratch coating, is still pretty good too. Yeah, Patricia was done too, that's beautiful. I mean, if we could only, all of us get that, we'd be ecstatic. Blue Jay project also, some stuff was done there for them also, which was in a rural park. It was a big project. Nothing had been done for them for years also. We did some work for them. Some work done in Hammond. Work done all over, but let's not forget that we have over 175 kilometers of roads. I realize that, Mr. Mayor, but I'm disappointed when I see, I don't know if I know the name of the street, all the way up to Moore's Village, St. Joseph, ma'am. Well, that St. Joseph would get prioritized over other needs because to me, Well, that was taking in a load of traffic. Don't forget, we put in a new road at the end to get onto Dr. Corbeil so that the buses wouldn't be passing all over because they're traveling all over side streets. I think somebody might have mentioned to me before that my time is running out, but the developer, I believe, should have had some sort of responsibility, Mr. Mayor, to build. It was city property. Let's not forget that we did that too. We changed a lot of major valves. How many valves did we change on that street? They were, they'd broken on us in any event. It was necessary to be that for this to be done, especially for all the schools there. And so some work was started in the winter time. The whole street would be opening next week. There would be less traffic going through all of our projects. Mr. Zant, I was going to say to you to continue on with what the mayor has said. A lot of people will see a freshly paved road, and it's just a matter of resurfacing. No, actually, sometimes we dig them up because we have to fix the substrata. I believe that Saint Joseph had a major issue with that. We thought that we were going to obtain grants for Saint Jacques Street, but we did not. We were told not to reapply for that street again for some reason. We do all we can. We go to Toronto. January, February, we have 2 meetings. We're in Ottawa this year. We're lucky. Last year was Windsor, but we attend the Association of Municipalities of Ontario conference. We meet ministers there. We do everything we can to get grants from them, and sometimes it just doesn't work. We have to knock at someone else's door. Well, if we can keep up the pressure, well, this is the way to do it, ma'am. And I literally pick pieces off of my road, and it's been like that. But please don't make a hole when you pick it up. Well, I don't know what everything's going to lead to, but I mean, it's been like that, Mr. Mayor, since my parents lived there. I remember that I'd attended Mr. Lalonde's meeting, and we were told that we'd give a push to have it priorities. Mrs. Collier, well, Mr. Mayor, the municipality has a program to repair roads. Some roads were in a state of chaos. That was one of the roads that were addressed. And so the city has a program in place. And to work on the streets over there, we do understand. As Mr. Councillor Lalonde has mentioned, that we're making an effort to put this in the budget to make everything right, and in this budget cycle we can maybe afford something to be done. My last comment is this: when Mr. Mayor commented on this situation a little while ago, he said that Ward 1 hadn't gotten anything for quite a while, except for Patricia and Pouliot this year. It's been nearly 10 years that Ward 1 didn't get anything. Ever since they rebuilt La Violette Street, we never got anything in Ward 1. Well, you got something this year. Poupard. That's right. There are over 1,300 cars that go by there, and the number is going to go up again. We're certainly going to do something for you. Well, we're not going away, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, then. Thank you. Let's go on now for a sponsorship request from Spell Me Canada. They're requesting for a bit of sponsorship. They're requesting sponsorship. We can, put it as a special item in budgets. If everyone pitches in, let's say $100, I'm going to put in $200 so that they can obtain a $1,000 grant. This is it's a worthwhile activity, and youngsters do represent our community quite well. Mrs. Simon, do you have anything else to say? Well, it's like it's a national spelling bee. Youngsters don't like to take dictation or even to spell out words. They have a limited time to do so. I attended at a grade level competition, the event, and I found it very worthwhile, both for myself and for the youngsters that took part in this. Notice of motion? question period. If you have any questions, now's the time to come up and ask them. Thank you. Yes. Your name and address, please. My name is Jacques Bougie, living at 1028 Campo Street. Could you please repeat for the lady here, Mr. Jacques Bougie? Jacques Bougie Spark Plug Shop. If people aren't aware, 1228 Campo Crescent. I operate a mechanic shop. All right. All senators are firing, sir. Go ahead. What can we do, Mr. Mayor, to avoid speed on Campo Street, speed infractions? Just phone the police officers. Just have the OPP station a police officer with a radar so that it can. Yes. So do I have to take down the plate numbers of those speeding in my area? I don't think that wouldn't give anything. Wouldn't give anything to take the license plate number. Well, they can take it down, and if it's a repeat thing, you can speak English. It's okay. Okay. Let's see. If you take the plate number of someone that's driving too fast and provide it to the police, they can use that as information and actually follow up on it. Typically, they need to catch you offender in the act. They need to know who's driving the vehicle. Any information helps. We pay over $3 million for their services per year for our municipality. Don't be shy to phone them, really. That's how I feel. They'll get tired of hearing you or hearing people complain, and they'll send somebody. I'm telling you, there's speeding problem is prevalent all over the municipality. I live on a country road that's as rough, well, almost as rough as Campo, but it's rough. And let me tell you, I don't know why people travel by so fast. They must be braking their cars as they're doing so. Mrs. Simard lives on a similar road. The only way to stop, and I know they complained on Duquette, which is a side road, and let me tell you that they did some good work. They purchased new boots for officers there on that road. It was pegged at 50, and everybody was driving at 80 or 90. That's right. Mr. Mayor, if he phones the police officers, 5124 is the phone number, by the way, they can park a phantom patrol car, an unmarked police car. I can give them permission even to set up shop on in my driveway if they wish to screen traffic. Fine. Any other questions? Hi, my name is Al McIntyre. I live at 1236 Campo Crescent. This gentleman here from Ward number 3 or 2, you were talking about farmers, and if you didn't work with farmers to develop towns, it wouldn't go anywhere. Yeah, you were talking earlier. Yes, the MDS, yes. I remember La Violette was a cornfield. So it's something that we all laugh about. We all talk about the worst street in Clarence and Rockland. We laugh and we joke, but it's not a joke. So please, if you can, prioritize it. It's a serious thing. That's all I had to say. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Well, thank you then. United Counties of Prescott-Russell report. All I'd like to mention concerns the cutting down of trees. Now, the United Counties has power over this, but they suggest that if we enact a resolution that controls clear cutting, they'll respect it. There are some areas that do not approve clear cutting, and others do. So the United Counties wish to confer upon individual municipalities the power to regulate tree cutting. Well, the Environmental Committee, Mr. Mayor, started work on some measures, and you can have this committee come up to council with something to that effect to enlighten us all. Well, that's fine. Fine then. Item 9.1, property to be declared surplus to the needs of the city, Drouin Street, whereas bylaw 2004-164 states procedures to dispose surplus, and whereas following a consultation that was conducted with all department heads, the administration recommends that the property recognized as 3575 Le Main Road be declared surplus, and that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council declares this property described as 3575 Drouin Street be declared surplus, and that Council authorizes the Clerk or the Finance Director to proceed to the sale of the property identified as 3575 Drouin Road in keeping with the policy adopted through Bylaw 2004-153. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. Just as a matter of curiosity, Mr. Mayor, do we perform an analysis of our assets, of this property that we hold, to determine whether on a long-term basis we need this property, or we're just waiting for people to come up willy-nilly and say, well, I'm interested in purchasing this bit of land? Well, you see, what I'm wondering is, did we perform a needs analysis with regards to the property that we have? If we're sitting on property that we'll never use, why do we keep them? Do we have anything to that effect? Well, we have a list, Mr. Mayor, of those properties that we have. If we take a look at what we have available, they're not significant pieces of land, so we're taking action at this time to dispose of them. I think we have to assess whether or not we have a need for those properties in the future. If there's no need whatsoever in the plans, why are we holding on to pieces of property that we don't need? Because they're going to be worth a lot more money later? Maybe, depending on the size of those properties. Well, we don't know who wants that property. This is a minor size. You can't build anything on this. This is an old pump station venue at that point in time. Well, it's close to an acre. Well, go ahead and build something on this if you're interested. No, I'm just saying, Mr. Mayor, it's right smack dab on the corner of that street. What? It's located on the corner of that street. Mr. Mayor, we'll come up with an inventory of property that we hold, and we'll include it in the 2018 budget. Well, what's the size of the property? Well, according to one of our good councillors here, it's 1 acre. 1 It's 1.11. Well, it's located halfway between Cheney and Joannis Road. It used to be the venue that housed the old Cheney Waterworks. Well, we certainly won't need this property. And we will proceed by advertising first, of course. The sale of this particular property, fine. All those in favor, carry then. Let's go on now to the amendment to the client accounts policy for daycare services. Councillor Lalonde André. The Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approves modifications to client accounts JAR 15-01 as recommended. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. All those in favor? There's a lady that's getting ready to address this issue, I believe. Any questions? Well, you know, she showed up, so how are things, ma'am? Good. She might have a question? All those in favor? Great. That's great. Question period is over and done with, ma'am. Sorry about that. Okay. Let's go on then. Let's go on. Everything was predetermined. Let's go on to delegation of authority with respect to property assessment and collection of taxes. Councillor Lalonde. Report FIN 2017-21 relating to the delegation of authority with respect to property assessment and the collection of taxes be received, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Council adopt a resolution to delect its power to Town Treasurer to deal with property-related matters within the City of Clarence and Rockland with the Property Assessment Commission. All those in favor? Carried. Item 9.4, tax reduction under sections 357 and 358 of the Ontario Municipal Act. Councillor Zant. Again, I only have it in English before me. The Municipal Council of the City of Clarence and Rockland hereby adopts Schedule A for tax reductions in the amount of $6,733, the city's share being $1,881, being applicants under Section 357 and 358 of the Municipal Act against all lands concerned as recommended. Seconded by Councillor Simard. Fine. Any questions? Councillor Zant? Well, we deal with this on a regular basis. Maybe it was explained to me a while ago. Maybe I forgot what this entails. Who are we? Why are we writing this off? Because we're going after people to pay their taxes, and these folks were saying, don't worry about it. Well, there's a different section, 357 and 358, where a resident can ask for a tax reduction in some cases. Now, one of them might be a vacant commercial property, for example, and they're allowed to ask for a rebate, subject to certain rates, because it's not being used. That's right. It's the rule that applies all throughout the county. I'm just trying to determine why. Yes, we're talking about 6,000 figure, but the county's share, the education share, when you take those off, well, not much left. Any other questions? Page 81, Mr. Mayor. Item 8. That was a typing error because it states the city budget for tax write-off was approved for 2018. It should read 2018. You mean the report? Yes. Yeah, it's just a typing error. Fine. Fine then. All right. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. Item 9.5, accounts receivable write-off. Councillor Levert, the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council authorizes a transfer of $32,051.63 from the Water Reserve to apply towards accounts receivable write-off items. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Questions? All those in favor then? Fine. I'd like a bit more explanation. Well, if we are to revisit that issue, the amount was in our accounts receivable, and it was delinquent for many years. And I researched this matter to determine whether it was going to be paid eventually. But there was a resolution 2015-109 stated that this amount be written off, but it has never been done. I'm simply asking you to follow up with this. But if we were doing so, it would put us in a deficit position. So I'm just asking that a transfer from one fund to another be performed. The reason why it's not in our current report tonight, if you wish me to elaborate on, I can. No, that's fine. Any other questions? All those in favor? Carried. Let's go on now to item 9.6, agreement to become a regional training center for the Ontario Fire College. Councillor College. The Committee of the Whole recommends that the Council authorizes the Mayor and the Clerk to enter into a signed agreement to become a regional training center for the Ontario Fire College. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. Questions? Councillor Berlinguet. I believe that somewhere in there it states financial impact to be absorbed within the approved operational budget of the department. This is what it states. I just want things to be understood. I want this to be understood. We don't want, we want to go ahead. Of course, we want to be caught short with unexpected results. Yes. To answer the councillor's question, the models set up by the Fire Marshal College, in order for us to teach the course, we have to send people to Gravenhurst to become instructors for that. We do send people for training throughout the year. In any event, it's in our training budget as opposed to sending groups of people to Gravenhurst to get that training. If we send one person to Gravenhurst to take that course and deliver it back here when they come back here, they save us money in the long run, and it actually provides a revenue stream to us. We don't anticipate any financial impact by sending an individual back to the charter course over an existing period of time. It will be absorbed by our operational budget. I just had a question. Can we send our captains? Who attends that course? Well, it's not one specific group. We're talking about different members depending on their availability and the course availability. So different people go for different courses. I was up there for 2 courses over the summer. The Ontario Fire College is really a good deal from a municipal perspective. It's $65 to follow a course. They house you, they feed you, they give you the training for $65, which is a really good deal. But we have a problem sometimes to convince volunteer staff to take a week of their time to go to Gravenhurst. So the problems involved in training our own staff is to incite volunteers to go up there. If we bring this training in-house, we can separate it over, let's say, 2 double weekends or 2 weekends. It allows people to stay with their families and it allows us to come up with a more agreeable training course. And through the regional training center, we can offer that opportunity to individual departments, and operate this on a cost recovery basis, basically. Councillor Lalonde? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Wilson, if I'm not mistaken, Hawkesbury was planning to get that when they built their new fire hall. Now, I don't know what happened. They never got it going? Well, not to my knowledge. The nearest place that has it would be Leeds and Grenville. I know that some others were in discussion with the fire college, but there's no cost for us to set it up. We can choose to set up and run it and enter into partnership with others. The cost is essentially nil, really. It's the absorbed cost of having people go in there and follow training. Will you be using then our existing facility for that? Yes. As we discussed in the Fire Master Plan discussion and as approved in the Council portion of tonight's meeting, our hope is to deliver more of the training components that are recommended in the Fire Master Plan locally, because we're finding very difficult for people to take that money during the Friday over the weekend to go to Gravenhurst. So we can offer it over the weekend to improve our training opportunities and our service delivery to meet the needs of our firefighters. Well, can you check with Hawkesbury to determine what happened? I can certainly ask. I know that my discussions with the principal of the fire college is that the nearest is at Leeds and Grenville, and we ran into the same problem. It's a significant travel time. We'll try to get that going for Prescott and Russell. Councillor Zett, well, if this has an opportunity to make us money, I think that the Ottawa firefighters, they don't have to go all the way to Leeds and Grenville, not only Prescott and Russell. If it has a possibility of even breaking even or making a profit, why not? Or not sending our people over there, or also we're saving time on that as well. Mr. Wilson, I attended a meeting today of Zone 6, the Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs from around Ontario. And the common thread throughout the meeting was that it was difficult to get people taking the course. And I entered into further discussion with chiefs within Prescott Russell, where we ran into challenges getting instructors training, officers training across the county. In addition to our regional training program, where we train our regional or volunteer firefighters, this is an initiative that Clarence and Rock is taking not only to solve our problem, but some of our county's problems as to how we want to pitch the flashover training that we can apply also to Bourget as well. Well, we also need a new budget for radios, do we not? Yes. Councillor, Mrs. Collier, I'm sorry. Well, the discussions around having a central training facility for the United Counties of Prescott Russell, well, those talks fell apart because they were looking at building a standalone training center for all of the fire departments to use. And it was a simple factor of money. There wasn't enough money within each of the municipalities to pay for that. So some of our folks were sitting on that committee, and that's what happened. That's what the initiative was certainly there, but what we presented to you in Bourget and what as Chief Wilson has put together for you addresses some of what those needs were. But the original plan was to build a full-blown fire training service, training center, extrication to firefighting techniques to maintaining and driving fire vehicles. This grand program would cost $300 million, you know, the creme de la creme, if you wish. So that's why it fell apart. It was a question of money, Mr. Lalonde. Well, knowing that the counties are always avid for money, but they don't know where to put it afterwards. But it's a good initiative. Certainly, we can save our volunteer firefighters from taking a week off from work to be able to do this. It'll certainly help your retention your retention problem, so I'm all for that. All those in favor, then carried. Thank you. Item 9.7, Bill 148, the Fair Workplaces, Better Jobs Act 2017. Yes, Mr. Mayor, I can read it if you wish. Yes. That the report number admin 2017-021 with regard to the potential impact of proposed Bill 148 be received as information. Seconded by Councillor Bourlanguette. For your information, I met with Grant Crack, Mr. Grant Crack last week, and I made him aware that we were certainly not happy with the state of affairs. I'll make a report to the United Counties of County Prescott and Russell next week. A lot of people forgot to take a look at the fine details inherent to this agreement. We obtained legal advice from lawyers. It would cost us quite a lot. As Mr. Lalonde stated beforehand, after the second reading of this bill, there will be a meeting held in Toronto. And I'm going to compel the United Counties to send over representatives because, you know, if things will go as they've gone up to now, it might cost up to 10% of $1.7 million, 10% worth of tax increases just to cover this item alone for all residents, and that's totally ridiculous. We're working on this. Councillor Lalonde, there's a notion that's circulating amongst municipalities that are exempt from this criteria, and I think it's important for you, Mr. Mayor, to have other counties to make them aware that they're not sheltered from this bill. Even if you don't have full-time employees from this department, they can take the salary from another city to make comparables. They can and base themselves on that particular salary. Any questions then? All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 9.8, the 10-year Capital Works Program. Councillor Levert, that be it resolved, that the 10-year Capital Works Program dealing with infrastructure, sanitary sewers, and bridges annexed to report 270517 be received, and that the Committee of the Whole accept to delay further action on this program for 1 month to allow members of council to consult individual residents or to pinpoint priorities identified within the program. And finally, that the final phase of the 10-year Capital Works program, as modified during the course of consultation, will be considered at the Committee of the Whole meeting of the 16th of October 2017. Seconded by Councillor Berlinguet. I'll give the opportunity to Mr. Keogh to react to all of this. Well, I believe he's still on holidays. No, he's on holidays tomorrow, but not tonight. See, he works one day out of the week, so.
No, Robert, the last piece goes
Well, the last piece goes back to the mayor. Oh, okay. Well, Mr. Mayor, I believe that we need to meet with our residents, of course. Well, I know we pinpointed a particular date, but I have a meeting scheduled for that date. Well, we'll look into that further. We mean, okay, we're talking business now. Let's do so, shall we? Mr. Mayor? Firstly, thanks to Julien and Mr. Darche for having compiled all of this data. This is a long, arduous task that they undertook. Well, thank you, Mr. Darche and Julien. Is Mr. Julien, has he left the building? No, he's right there. I see. Just stand up, Mr. Julien. Yeah. So we prepared a bit of a presentation to help you through this. We're going to ask you to move to receive this document and take a look at it. Now, the presentation will be made in English. This is the first concept that we want to present. It's a corporate asset management program and its entirety. Now, what we're focusing on, however, is right here, the existing asset portion, and it's phase one, the portion of the existing assets. And these assets are mainly the linear infrastructure, your roads, bridges, water mains, and your sanitary sewers, and so on and so forth. And we will be bringing the other parts to your attention in the future. So, what we've provided for you today were continuity schedules, all right, for transportation, wastewater, and water, and also supporting 10-year capital works for each schedule, and a plan that shows a proposed project, so a map. And when we looked at this document, what we encourage you guys, council, to do is to start with the continuity schedules. They will give you an overall sense of the expenditures and the revenue streams. And then once that's done, then go to the 10-year programs, and with the maps, we'll help you to go through that all together. We'll give you a visual sense of that. So, this is a continuity schedule. We've pulled that out because this is probably the most substantial part of the plan, and I think it'll give you a good idea of what we've focused on. And as a reference, we've taken an 18-year point. At the top, we have a revenue stream, our balance forward, projected balance forward for our roads. As of December 31st, 2017, it may change as projected. It's projected it will change. And then we have our road reserve, 1.14 million, our gas tax. This is only our portion. There's, we're talking here about $734,000. Now, most of that is used up by different needs structures. The UCPR contributions, we assume that we'll continue to get this contribution past 2018. That's an assumption that's built into this plan, and also the OCIF funding. The program ends in 2019. However, we're confident that we'll receive at a minimum past 2019. Now, we don't know how many years. We'll assume the management of this now in 2018, and only in 2018, for lack of terminology, we call this a debt issue. However, we're going to revise our terminology, but this is going to be representing 2018 for outstanding issues, outstanding projects that need to be addressed by us. You'll see that it's paid for, and it was based on a pay as you go through your road reserves. And you see the expenditures here for the roads. For the first year, it's $858,000, bridges, and so on and so forth. And you'll see here that the projects $208,000, which nets out. Where are we at with the scratch code for 2018? Well, the reason there is no scratch in 2018 is that we've analyzed what the needs were based on different strategies and based on the funding sources that we had, and the scratch codes are one strategy out of many strategies that will be used. And based on the findings that we have and the timing for that, the plan for 2019 and 20, well, if I look at old Highway 17, we only have one section left after this year. Can we not finish that section and be over with it? Well, that's at the discretion of council. This is what we recommend, Mr. Mayor. However, at the budget period, like David mentioned earlier, well, I don't think the amount would be that high to finish that road. And this is all on the table for months, so we encourage this type of question and discussions, and we'll look at that and come up with answers to those types of questions. Well, you're going to see things in there to say, well, I'd like to have this and that and that. But we had to look at the funding envelope that we have, Mr. Mayor. So staff had to make some tough decisions. You're going to see something like that where we're recommending a gap in 2018 and start it up in 2019. Council might find that unacceptable. So if we move that forward through the consultation process, we'll have a look at it and we just move forward. And there's a possibility if something else is going to have to move out, if we're going to respect the funding sustainability model. I just want to thank you for this because finally we have something more visual now. You and I had discussed this. We're not, of course, completely in agreement with everything, but I think that this is a fantastic beginning, and I love it. Keep it in mind, everybody, also that the gas tax in 2019 and on could go up or down, could fluctuate. All of these things could go up or down. Obviously, these numbers that are expenditures are not set in stone. We know that anyways. But I love the fact that we have a good beginning. I think that we did a lot of scratch coating during the last 2 years or 3 years, actually, since you've been on board. And that's actually saved a lot of... I don't think we've repaved or scratch coated these many roads in a very long time. I'm quite happy with this so far, and we can see that things are kept going. One thing is gravel under roads. If I look at Chemin Voisin, for example, which would have rocks being, or re-graveled, that's all included under roads. It's a private road. Well, it's a private road. If we step foot on it, however, it's our responsibility from now on. And that's taken care of. So it's separate then. Okay, well, that's fine. I just wanted to know. Sorry, Julien, go ahead. I apologize. Fine. Other than Voisin, gravel roads are incorporated in there, and there are some strategies to follow up on this. Councillor Belinguette. Very good. Well, fine. I appreciate being given this. Could you please expound on some details? However, well, we haven't gone into detail yet, but basically 64% of our road network, as we've done a range as to what we can maintain or not, 36% that is not subject to capital, another 64% that has been captured Not all of them are on this plan because they may not be due to be maintained at this time. They may be in the next 10-year cycle. It's not all of the roads, but it's the majority of the roads. The majority of the roads, subject to the 10-year plan. Yes. I just want to make sure that what's been stated up to now is that this plan is using our existing funding. So that's why you won't find all of the roadways, everything that needs to be done or will be done. What we're recommending to you as staff, based on policies, based on the guidelines that these roads should be done, based on the constraints of this envelope. Well, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, we could show that the 100% of the roads in here, you would then see how much more money you would need to repair the roads. I believe we've already pointed out what needs to be done beyond 2018. Yes. Are these numbers included over and beyond what needs to be done in 2018? Are they included in the projected budget? Well, that's good news because the county's received $5 million of gas tax income that I read that today. Where did you see that? I think I saw something with regard to this on Facebook. Or was it $3 million? Well, really, we're paying for this through our road reserve, and every year we need to come up with $2,000. We have outstanding issues that we need to. There are some assets, let's say, that have failed. And if we don't replace those, we'll put ourselves in a compromising position. What we're doing is borrowing some money to even out that curve, that peak demand, so that it's spread out over the 10 years cycle. But it's funded through well, there's no tax increase, for example. There's no difference on the tax. Mr. Keogh. Well, the mechanics of this, Mr. Mayor, and the issue stemming from pay-as-you-go, they're using those funds, and those funds will be used to service the debt. We're not asking the taxpayer to pay additional money for this. And also, we're going to have in the budget, Mr. Mayor, as we do every year, a proposal to increase pay-as-you-go. And that comes as a cost to the taxpayer, and these additional monies could be directed to additional roads to fund this program. Well, that will be discussed at budget time. Absolutely, it will. We just want to present status quo right here, right now, without making any revenue assumptions. Just a final thing also. So, for example, if you added $100,000 to the road pay-as-you-go contribution, for all intended persons, that will add $1 million to the spending plan because that $100,000 would go in every year over a 10-year period, which is in the report right now. An additional 100 grand per year. That's right, per year, but that's a little different. No, I understood. I understood that. So, for a year, it's exponential. Yes? Go ahead, Julien. Okay. So, I think there are things through this report that have been explained and still need to be explained based on sustainable revenue. For example, what we've stated prior to this has been based on sustainable revenue. We're only planning to issue a debt on a chronological basis, financed by the road work. There will not be any increases in taxes. However, project cost network is at network level versus a project level. That means that there's a benchmark costing. For example, let's say you have $20,000, including traffic control. We roll that all in one fell swoop, and we're asked why we come up with a price. So at the project level, projects will vary with needs from project to project. And of course, in the 10-year capital works, some of those dollars that are shown in previous years. And last year, Cell Engineer produced data prior to construction, and we've identified some issues that will come up. And there's also adjustment made over adjustments made over time based on the deterioration curve. 64% of our road network, by the way, is within this section here, and that's what we consider as being a just-in-time and adjustment-time projects, where the costs would be less than the roads that have gone past their should I say expected life. So if there's a road missing in that report that's really banged up right now, what you're saying is it's under that 35 and will not get addressed at all? Well, what we're saying is that we can address those roads with some bridging strategies, which is where scratch code comes into place. Your scratch code should be used more towards that. It gives you an an additional 5 to 7 years, and it provides you time to put monies aside to eventually go to that road. 5% grant funding, ways to address work to be performed on that road, but they're not covered by that funding. I believe that, for example, La Belle, when we've resurfaced it with crushed stone and performed further work, there are different strategies that we can look at, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it doesn't mean that we'll disregard a road entirely. There are many projects that we've discovered or discarded, but that were looked into. We'll revisit so many strategies that were looked into. Some were adopted, some were not. I can't wait to find out why that specific road was not worked on. That's going to be interesting. I can mention, just a comment here though, this is probably one of the most important aspects because there's going to be a tendency, because your constituents are going to be coming at you, and I've heard it already. And the development plan reflects this as well. And you're doing this section of road rather than this one, which is worse. Well, the one that's worse has gone well past its best before date, and we have a strategy of $3 million per kilometer reconstruction. But if you capture it before it crosses that line, then you're $200,000 or $250,000. So you optimize your dollars. You see, the challenge becomes, and you're getting to that, do we just ignore the other roads? And I would hope not. But we're going to have to come up with some innovative techniques. The scratch coat is a viable strategy in certain circumstances, but not all. So we're going to have to take a look at that. There are some roads that have gone so far beyond their best before dates, as I call them, with regards to reconstruction. You can't afford to do a worst first. It's just not feasible. If you go into that strategy, and I was talking to one gentleman out there, we were talking about a road, and I said, you know, based on the length of what you're telling me, if it needs to be reconstructed, well, $1.5 million of $2.5 million is going to be eaten up by one project. I don't think that's very viable. But it's going to be a public document, however, at some point. So the final version will probably be a public document. So people will generally go and see where they stand, where they can generally forecast something being done on their street. Now, first reaction is, okay, well, I can't see my street until 2028. I don't see my street. So either they forgot it in the report, or it's never going to get done. So we need to be prepared for that as well. But my experience is that when you implement a plan like that, it helps members of council with the public. Because they're asking, like right now, I've had members of the public, when are you going Héron? I can't tell them. I don't have the authority to tell them that right now. If you adopt a plan in principle, however, usually if somebody asks when their road's going to be done, it's going to be 5 years out there, and you'll notice that we're putting in some money in there to do the pre-engineering. People derive a comfort if they can see it. There's consideration given to it. And I guess the only question becomes, as long as council follows the plan, that'll be an expectation. But it's probably one of the most important processes that you're going to consider other than your budget process. There's also quite a bit of wildcard factor in there, as Julien stated, If you're banking on the counties to fork up the money every year, there's already talk, of maybe canceling that amount. Yes, after it's done in 2018, $5.5 million of federal tax money. I don't think they're going to have that cancel. I know, but there's still a possibility. OCIF jumps back and forth. You and I had that discussion a few years back, Mr. Darch. And this is timely. Because if we're adopting a plan like this, next year being an election year, now's the time, excuse the expression, to harass the heck out of those politicians. We need sustainable funding to be able to do something like that. That's why I'm not big fan of these grad programs. It's a bit of a lottery. Yeah, you're fighting against your neighbor. I'd rather rely on sustainable funding. But with this other one, it's up and down. Mrs. Collier? Well, one can make an overall comment, Mr. Mayor, that if you look at your revenue, your total revenues, and this is just on the road situation, you're working with about $2.5 million a year, and as we priced out the cost to do Saint-Jacques, we realized that one road, which was the point that Mr. Darch wanted to make, soak up all that money, we do nothing else, assuming no debt, right? And we've really emphasized and worked to get the best value for the money envelope that you have right now, right? So that you're touching as many roads as possible, dealing with those roads that you can save before delving into dealing with those seriously damaged roads. So that's one approach. Certainly, it's one approach. We can encourage you in the next month to contact Mr. Darch to set up a meeting to go through the list, to, have your questions and to understand what other approaches there can be. So increasing the pay-as-you-go into the money, into the system, increasing debt is the other option, which is the significant piece of work that needs to be done. Well, you said a moment ago, because I asked about Julac, and that's what Mr. Darch informed me, is that the other section is not on the list here. It's so bad that it's not worth patching or whatever. Whatever needs to be done will need to be redone again. Mr. Keogh, well, I just wanted to mention you were putting a call to council last year in our guideline report in comparison with other municipalities, with 6 Ontario municipalities, and I can revisit this, and just shows that we're not alone. It's just an infrastructure gap throughout Ontario. It's phenomenal. That it's a phenomenon that exists across the world. We know that we can't all get all of this done. This approach gives you the best value for money. But if you take other approaches, other municipalities take other approaches, and look, we can provide you that list of projects that are not happening. That might be helpful. So if we're going to get our 2.5 or $3 million next year, well, in the existing 2017 budget, there's a 1.127 pay-as-you-go. That's in the base program. It's in the base program right now. And that money will be used to repay that debt. It's not going to be additional money required from the taxpayer. So they're going to be paying off that debt. There is going to be $3 million worth of roads at one time in 2018, the 2018 budget, but they're going to repay it over 15 years. It's going to be coming out of that fund, if you will. And there are some projects also that are done under the 15-year capital works program where you enter into a debt finance project situation. Well, the unfortunate part from 2018, we started off without any debt insurance, but we found with what we know of the project for 2017 that we know that some culverts are on the verge of collapse, and there's $1 million worth of culvert work that needs to be done. We don't. It's a safety issue. We have no other choice but to perform the work. Do you use the pay-as-you-go money to do that, or do you issue debt? If you don't issue debt and tap into pay-as-you-go, you're going to find that your program will only deal virtually with culverts. There's $1.5 million worth of culvert work. Can you not apply for grants? Well, I guess you can, but most of the grants, when they come out, for the criteria is health and safety related. I'm not saying that they don't apply in our case, but we wanted to get those things off the books. You've got Lacasse that came up, where you're talking about significant work, Bouvier that we're talking about, and all of this culvert work. Julien and I were talking about this, and we just said, let's just debt finance this for 1 year, get it off the books. The repayment of that debt is unfortunately going to come out against your total revenue stream, but hopefully we don't issue any more debt. Although there are a few other projects out there, I have to tell you, that are going to be debt financing, and we'll be dealing with that at budget time. I just have a question about this, however. Look, we're just talking about road surfacing on this map, or are we talking about streets as well? Well, it depends on the project you're dealing with regard to reconstruction. Like I've said, some roads have passed their life expectancy. Well, I'm talking about sewers that need to be done, not just roads. Well, there are some projects, for example, where we're proposing to do some water main repairs and so on and so forth. That's why we've come up with a schedule for water and wastewater as well. There are also capital programs available for that. I'm asking this because I know that Wallace, Garo, and Pouliot have serious problems with water lines freezing. The sewers there are probably original. I do not know, and I just don't see them on the map at all. So I'm just wondering if this has been taken into consideration. Well, I'm just wondering if that's being looked at. Well, you may find that I believe that Gerald has detailed information with regard to the underground infrastructure. But what I'm surprised at is that our underground infrastructure is in reasonably good condition, notwithstanding what we've experienced with Laurier Street. In general, it's pretty darn good. Yeah, fine. So the last thing we'd like to bring to your attention, Mr. Mayor, is this. The mention of grant funding. We haven't assumed any grant funding in years. Should grant funding be realized, it will help the program advance other projects. Any other questions then? All those in favor? Carried then. Well, thank you. Well, thank you very much. Excellent work. Excellent work. Bouvier Road project update and options. Mr. Lalonde, could you please read this resolution? The Committee of the Whole recommends that Town Council accepts corrective measures to be taken as indicated in option A of Report INF 2017-58, and that Town Council accepts to delay the paving works on Bouvier Street between Baseline and Vinette, and to finance them through assets financing with regard to the 2017-2018 available funding. Councillor Lalonde, Mr. Darch, I know that this is the smart thing to do at this point. We will need to advise the residents by way of a letter explaining what has happened. And in enough detail, I believe I can help you draft the letter I'm alluding to, if you wish. But this has been a long, thorny issue. I think that the residents there will understand that we don't have much of a choice. We just don't want to spend money and then have it wasted away. We need to contact them, communicate with them. Can we not pave a section of that road? Well, the unfortunate part is that 400 meters of about 3,000 meters is located in the middle. So I guess you can have them come in from the sides, but the cost to do the work on the soft area on the sides is almost up to the level of the budget that's approved this year. So we might consolidate, take a look at the balance left over in the fall and consolidate it for next year. We have to take a look at what the project's all about. I guess what I want to talk about to staff about is what can we do maybe to flag an occurrence of this nature. I know that we do coring periodically, and it's usually done at 5-day intervals. So usually we can span either side and say everything's right with the world. But I just want to see if there's a different strategy on these longer projects to try and work this site. I really didn't like bringing this report forward to you. Well, I didn't mind reading it, but I hear what you're saying, sir. We're just creating havoc for your winter operations as well. And, we might consider and even talk to Richard about the possibility that given the cost of fixing the soft spots, and I don't have anything left over to pave with during the winter months. No, well, look, we'll perform the repairs this year in a timely fashion and address what needs to be addressed next year. Any other questions then? All those in favor? Carried, then thank you. Fall cleanup. Yes. I move that the fall cleanup program be received for information purposes. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. I just want to make sure, Mr. Darch, obviously this falls under you, the fall cleanup? Yes, it does. I get how important it is to make sure that we don't waste money either. I'm all for that. I just want to make sure that the services are not reduced. I read the report as far as tonnage is down, which I find really surprising because we have more people in Rockland, more stuff that people buy as disposable and doesn't last as long, and there's less people at the dump and less people putting stuff in the curbside. Are they burning things in the backyards? I'm not sure if I can answer you as to that. I just find it hard to believe that there's less on the day of garbage pickup. Of course it looks like it, but I say, well, good, it's active. Well, look, I've seen on the countryside where there's left, but by doing it every year, people don't accumulate stuff as much. We used to do it twice a year. Now we only do it once a year. Before you'd attended, we used to do it twice a year. I want to make sure that services are kept up. I think it's a more efficient way. We can make some savings. There's less of an impact on the public works staff, but I think there's the same level of service to the residents there. I went over this with NE in further detail, and I think it makes sense. The key is going to be the communication component, and you'll notice under the report in risk management, we talk about those strategies that we're going to use to get the word out there. Because if we ever get that whole thing away, we're going to get some illegal dumping. So I just want to make sure, that, yes, Councillor Belanget, I just want to say that pickers actually come and pick through the waste that's being that they put at the end of driveways. But there's some materials such as broken chairs and whatnot that don't get picked up. They don't pick up couches? Pickers don't. Okay, there's a couple that I'd like to put out on the road, couches. So you see, the residents are still receiving the service here. So instead of 2 weeks pickup, they're aligning it together. Yeah, I think that the key is communication here, just to make sure that we get everybody on the same page. October 22nd to the 26th then. And I think that we need to advertise a lot more the fact that you can actually get a text reminder about what's Blue Box, because a lot of people don't even know that service exists.
I know, but
So, well, they can get informed by their neighbors. I know. I used to do that in any event. In any event, maybe Mrs. Simal knows more about this than we do. Well, yeah, yeah. People use Blue Box for paper disposal. Not only Blue Boxes, let me tell you that much. So, yes. Let's go on now. The following item, St. Joseph Project, contingency. We had to vote on the fall cleanup issue. Yes. All those in favor? Carried. Item 9.11, the St. Joseph Project, the Committee of the Whole. Do you want me to read this? Committee of the Whole recommend that Council adopt the transfer of $50,000 from the Rose Reserve Fund because of costs incurred following the stoppage of works on St. Joseph's Street in between Avenue du Parc and Laurier, as well as landscaping-related program, as indicated in report DNF 2017-51, and also that the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council approves that the retaining wall, my God, do I have trouble reading tonight, the retaining wall not be built within the frontage of the 875 St. Joseph as recommended by INF report 2017-21. As you're all aware, the gentleman is aware that we go forward and put up shrubs. Which gentleman was that? Yes, he addressed town council there. He went to see what was going on with Mr. Bergeron, and Mr. Bergeron gave him a 25% discount, and he's trying to come up with even better prices. But he's also giving him a 25% discount. Well, look, I have a question, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Darch, with regard to the St. Joseph project, I'd like you to explain to me why stopping the work costs $50,000. The work stoppage itself, if you take a look at page 27, for example, we're estimating a change order there of $22,000. $22,000. But there are some other elements involved. We made an estimate about the rock garden or whatnot for the residents at 864, and I left $18,000 as a contingency. Now we're winding this project down where I'm crossing my fingers. That's it. But we'll probably have to spend a little money on the signal timing that was done today. Well, the design of the road, to come up with a 3-laner. So we had to resort to further engineering plans. I have another questions concerning to this. So far, it looks great as to what's been done. So far, no problems. Can we put up a new sign to the stop sign at the bottom of the hill on Municipal? Mrs. Malt was referring to that, and I'm not used to a new stop sign being put up. So you might have this new signage saying a new stop sign is being saying to motorists, alert motorists that there's a new stop sign up there. Second, great new parking lot in front of Sainte Trinité. Took away all of the parking for Rockland Public. So Rockland Public on St. Joseph used to have a lane at that part where people used to park to pick up their children because there was no parking available within the parking lot. It's filled with staff and buses. And as I went by there, the no parking signs are still up. They shouldn't be, because the road no longer accommodates parking. And all of the cars were parked there. Now you took away all of the parking allowed used by people to pick up their children. So I've gotten a lot of really angry people saying, this is really ridiculous. This is the only place we could park, to pick up the kids, because we can't get into the parking lot because the school buses were there. Again, this is one of those things where, yes, was it at the open house? Sure. Did anyone notice that the parking was going to be disappearing? No. So I wouldn't just so that I have a clear understanding of it, talking about this to you further. Well, there's nothing more that we can do. You can see where they actually took the sidewalk to where it used to be and brought it closer to the road. Like there was room to actually continue having some space there for people to park and have the bike lane right beside the parked cars and the truck. So I have no problems talking to you, but you have a lot of very upset people that can't park anywhere, and they'll get some tickets, and that's not cool. All right, you look into that. Any other questions? All those in favor then? Item 9.12, fire stations, revised options and budget request. I don't have budget printed out here, but I have budget, B-U-D-E-T, printed out on my, whatever that means. Fire stations, revised options, and budget request? No, it's budget request, of course. Fine, let's just pass this around. Here, Germain. Just grab a copy and hand over the rest, please. Okay. The Committee of the Whole recommend that Council approve option A with a revised budget in an amount of $6,422,000 for the construction of fire stations, emergency medical services, and the Committee of the Whole also recommend that Council approves a revised budget in the amount of $3,231,000 for the construction of an establishment that will house fire services and medical services in Bourget, taking into account a reserve fund of 10%, and that the Committee of the Whole recommend that the Chief Administrative Officer negotiate with committees within Prescott Russell for the potential sale of the said establishment for the sale of potential fire services along Landry. Seconded? I'll second this for discussion purposes only. Questions, Mr. Lalonde? Well, if I take a look at the photo here, that's the first time that I've heard about the adoption of 5B. I see. So the layout that they've asked for is a single door front and back with angled parking inside. I see what you mean. I see what you mean. Yeah, yes. And an option is to have this 45-degree angled parking. That's what they have in Hawkesbury. Do we have the floor plan? The floor plan? Same thing. No, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. I've spotted. That's fine. Okay. Any questions? Councillor Berlinguet. I understand that we, well, I'm against this in principle, but not because I don't think that the fire department deserves the best, that we should go ahead. But we originally discussed, however, a fire station for the center, downtown Rockland itself. Now, the only reason that I understand that Bourget is on this document is that we want to incorporate, to put in a new building there, but that's not resolved yet. I don't think we should agree with going ahead with the construction of a fire station in Bourget until it's confirmed. But we've already discussed that tonight. The process is already underway. Well, I'd like, firstly, if we don't come to an agreement with the United Counties of Prescott Russell, I don't think that we should proceed with any plans of building a fire station in Bourget. We just talked about adding a few $1 million to the debt. That's a $10 million further addition to the debt. Well, not to the overall debt. No, but the United Counties of Prescott and Russell, it's going to be debt that we're hoping to repay for revenue, but we're still adding money to the debt. Well, the ambulance will be paid by the municipality. I understand, but we're still talking about for $7 million, really, approximately, to spend on fire stations that are going to be added to the debt again. Another $7 million again to do this, and it just keeps being piled on and piled on. I know it's going to cost a little more. It's going to be around $4 million. We have to live with it. I don't agree with building or rebuilding this. Not yet. We just don't have the money. If we get into an agreement with the United Counties Prescott Russell, then we look at it. If not, we should not be building a station in Bourget. I don't know why we're having this discussion. We had a discussion at the back, and we agreed that we have to come up with an agreement to get going. But Mr. Mayor, he was also told to wait and to talk about it out here. That's why. Well, what I'm saying, I know it's the committee of the whole that we're involved in right now. We have to revisit this again, but I do not want to approve. You know, what we're saying is let's approve this, and if we don't get the United Counties of Prescott Russell okay, we're still going to go ahead with the 2 stations. I don't agree with that. I only say that we should approve 1 station in town if we don't get the United Counties approval. Why don't we take a look at the agreement that was arrived at with the UCP? Are we going to wait for them? Well, Mrs. Collier. Well, at this point in time, Mr. Mayor, in order to move forward with the fire stations, the Rockland Fire Station that was identified 4 years ago as a need, the Bourget Station was identified for 2018. Last budget, we advanced the Bourget Station from 2018 to the 2017 budget, so we only advanced it 1 year. And that was to accommodate the request that the paramedics wanted to have a joint facility with us. Now, if we delay your comment and approvals tonight to wait for the United Counties, that will impact the timing of the delivery of those stations. So, this evening, the discussion, I believe, can happen separately around the fire stations, and the paramedics posts can be pending approval from the United Counties. Still, in principle, we need both the Rockland Station and the Bourget Station, and the Clarence Creek Station is close on the heels. I'm saying you can't keep piling on to the debt. We should be spending millions of dollars on top of millions of dollars if we don't get the okay from the UCPR. Well, can I have a question? There are a lot of reports. I can't recall whether I saw it in one report or the other, but what we see here is what's included in the station. You talked about the meeting rooms, the saunas and stuff. Well, in the appendix, if you'll open them, or you have a paper copy, the options lay out there that show a floor plan. I guess that I need to put a caveat to council that these are conceptual floor plans that we've done just to have a concept of what this will look like. Once we approval from council, we'll come up with a design team that's going to come on board and do official drawings. Those are concept floor plans that Colliers has put together based on discussions back and forth with our team. So that's sort of where you can see it. We do have dotty sheets that say that these rooms have so much square footage. We've had to massage that a bit through stations, particularly in Rockland, because keeping the existing station, which is what we're proposing for council's adoption, massaging stuff around, keeping into mind where the existing walls of the station are at present. We can't have a room that has a wall built in the middle of it. Obviously, we have to take into consideration the existing footprint and the square footage available. We've done this. Well, we've talked about this. I don't know if this was talked about last meeting, the actual cost of maintaining this station with a sauna and a room. And what about Rockland? 30,000 for Rockland? Yes, with a sauna and a gym. I know, but I can't remember which pages everything's on. I'm not for having a gym in here. The gym is not bad, because when we went to visit the other places, the 2 places we went to see, they said that the gym was good. I'm not too crazy about having a spa there, a sauna. Well, the reason with the gym, I'd like to finish up, is that we have to lease this equipment, we have to maintain this equipment. This equipment is only good for about 5 to 6 years before we have to recycle them out and buy them again. And this is all going to be on us to do, and this is why this thing is a major thing. The sauna, I looked at the pricing of running one, it doesn't really cost that much, and it doesn't have to replace anything, it just sits there. But the gym is an issue. We have gyms in the city. I'd actually be willing to give them a discount, and get a membership at another gym. Well, I believe no firefighter will say that it's a bad thing to get as much stuff as they can in a fire station. That's understandable. Well, I know of some venues where they have a gym, but where they've bought their own equipment, where they've stocked their own gym. The sauna part, um, the YMCA does not have a sauna. No, this is not a bad thing. I mean, to adapt the sauna facilities. I spoke to two fire chiefs. One had the sauna facilities. Another fire station didn't have a sauna or a sauna facility. I don't know if the city of Ottawa or something else was, or some other municipality was stating that they were losing a great deal of volunteer firefighters because of the cancer rate that was quite prevalent amongst their staff. I don't know if it was because of the gear they were using, but we should not lock ourselves into a situation where we're going to be faced with a gym that we have to continually fix, maintain, and pay for. Well, to the mayor and city councilors, the conversations that I've had with both employees, both full-time and part-time employees, suggested that there was a willingness on part of those members to potentially fund that equipment, to potentially go into those facilities if potentially we have space for it. Well, they'll give you the space, but don't come to us though for equipping the gym though. For I know that in 5 years, well, we'll come up with that contention where it's really not up to us to pay for equipment. Well, I know that some fire stations had storage facilities that were converted into gymnasium facilities, and vice versa, by the way. Or we can offer discount memberships for people to attend the gym. Well, I need the gym. I know he's a fire chief. Look, I will point out that one of the discussions and some of the discussion behind involving a gym in the fire station is that we're encouraging our volunteers to come to the station, and I don't have to pay them to be there. Now, if there's a call, they're already at the fire station. We collectively benefit from an improved response time because there's a people there using the gym. It costs us a bit of money to put in square footage for housing equipment. Asking them, let's say, to fund the equipment, or we come up with some funding partnership. However, we want to flesh that out going forward. The sideline benefit in 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road is that for periods of time, not only do we benefit, in theory, from more fit firefighters, which reduces the risk of heart attack, which is still the #1 leading cause of death for firefighters, but at the end of the day, we have members that are coming to the station for a free gym membership that have the ability to respond calls directly from the station. So we benefit from a good response time, a reduced level of a heart attack, which will reduce claims against the city. Regards to availability to spas, so we're already paying claims to offset the cost of illnesses incurred by firefighters due to firefighting activities. It shouldn't be an issue for anyone breathing in carcinogens from their gas masks, but it's the absorption of carcinogen agents through the pores of our skin. If you go into a fire, all of the garbage in the air is absorbed by our skin. We come out, we take the coats to cool off, and the pores close down and capture the carcinogens. It's relatively new in the firefighting world to look into ways to protect ourselves against this. I think we looked at videos to talk about those new steps that are taken to protect our firefighters. I think we owe that to them for the cost of putting into that. You're talking about the sauna right now? Yes. Is it big enough? I mean, how many firefighters responding to a call are mostly going to want to go in there? Well, of course, not everybody goes into the smoke. You have to stagger that and sweats it out, and they stagger that. That's fine. But I think that something's better than nothing. You're right, but you have to understand our perspective that we can't be seen as building a Taj Mahal. I want to give you all the tools that you need. But I mean, we're not made out of money. So we have to be aware of that. And there's got to be a fine line here. I agree 100%. I respect that it's a difficult decision for council to make. It's a new idea. I think, again, I would reiterate what the chiefs have said in the video. It's not a luxurious spa where you go sit and wrap your towel around you. It's designed to go in and sweat out toxins absorbed by the fire. Some fire stations have put in a stationary bike, but that's and getting them this particular type of equipment is designed to get toxins out of me. I can attest to you, 20 years in the service, if you ask any fighter that's ever been in a fire, you can smell the smoke for days after a fire. Every single time I take a shower, I can smell the smoke. Even when I go in after fire investigations I've conducted for 3 days after I've been into that building, every single time I go into the fire, I smell smoke that stems from that fire. The reason is that all of those smoke smells, all of those toxins are absorbed but when I'm going in there doing a fire investigation, not fighting a fire. So anything that we can do to protect our firefighters, I think we owe it to them. My commitment, certainly the conversations I've had with both my volunteers and my members, is that they're open to that discussion to determine how we get stuff there with regards to gym equipment. Or what we can do is put the gym equipment in there and ask a small fee for any firefighters just to maintain this equipment. Well, they might be amenable to that, Councillor. If anybody wants to, kick in $5 each, to oversee the maintenance. Yes, Andre? Well, I think that we lost. We're just. Well, I'm not going to say yes to a plan. My apologies if that doesn't suit you. I think we're caught up in details. I'm more concerned about size and cost at this point than a sauna and the gym, to be honest with you. That's part of the cost, though, but go ahead. But if we take a look at this, we're looking at a very sizable building. If we take a look at the plans, and Richard touched upon this a tad bit with the impact that this is going to have on our debt, because that's going to be financed by our debt from A to C. Even the DCs are subject to borrowing provisions. Now we have the Bill 148 impact that's going to we know that we have to pay to finance the debt that will be coming up due soon. But if we take a look at the situation, we're not dealing with 1 or 2 fire stations, we're dealing with 4 buildings. The 2 buildings in Rockland are separated by 1 wall. There's 1 wall, really, that separates both buildings. If you build another wall, you'll come up with 2 buildings. The same rule applies to the Bourget venue. What I'd like to see is this, is that we come up with an option where they're really combined together, that the space that is the available space that is within our firehouse also houses paramedics. What we were told, we were forewarned that you're not going to put in paramedics with firefighters because you wind up with a war. Give us a reason for this. Well, they're paying rent where we're building the wall. The United Counties of Prescott Russell. Well, who pays the United Counties? I know, but this is a contract we enter into with the United Counties. But, Mr. Mayor, look, let's take a look at other examples. One of the better examples that I can think of is the Barrie-related example where they're building a combined station housing fire, ambulance, and police services because they can save 40% of construction costs. The United States are doing this as regular practice. They merge ambulance and firefighting services together. I know exactly where to draw the line in between paramedics and firefighters. Everybody's aware of this. The reasons are quite explicit in Facebook and throughout. But there's a cultural problem that splits both, causes a split or friction between both of those entities. But the bottom line is this. Who's called upon to pay for this? The residents of the United Counties of Prescott Russell as well as the Rockland residents. If we can say to our ratepayers that we can save 25 to 30% of total construction costs by combining both facilities, that's something that we need to consider. 30% to remove a wall? It's not a matter of removing a wall, Mario. Well, yes, you just stated combine them. Look, you have two kitchens, Mario, in that venue, two rooms, you have two lounges, you have two washrooms, two sets of washrooms. Combine those together and take a look at the space you'll save. Well, the washroom is based upon the number of people that are in there. Well, you see, there's a line to the bathroom here, and there are 9 of us here at Town Hall. But in Rockland, we can accommodate how many firefighters? How many firefighters are in Rockland right now? 40. Well, 30 plus our base staff, 35 plus bylaw, 41. But the overall goal, as mentioned, was to be able to oversee training for the entire city. So your rooms are planned for approximately a 100-person capacity. So you're going to cut back on washrooms? No, you're not. You don't need to have an EMS washroom for 2 ambulance people. You have 2 or 3 extra EMS people added on. Well, you're talking about 5 ambulances. They're going to spend 80% of their time in downtown Ottawa, Mr. Mayor. You know that as well as I do. That's an argument we can make use of, Mr. Lalonde. If you have a tenant and a tenant requires a wall between the two, then that's it. If we don't want to accommodate his wishes, we might as well say to the counties, never mind, we don't want to put up a wall, but they want to put up a wall, and matters end there. You're having me believe that if you appear before the United Counties and you address mayors telling them that there's an option on the table that will save 30% of costs that the counties have to pay for, that they'll say no. Well, look, you'll have 5 ambulances that need to be parked. Well, it's not the parking bays that are problems here. Well, there's a charging room, a utility room, an IT room, a tech room, a supplier room, which they clearly need, a living space, which is very, very tiny. And that basically means, hey, while you're on break, have a and a men's and a women's bathroom. There's nothing there. You have 2 mechanical rooms, a heating system. Everything will be doubled. All you need to do is that if you have a boiler, the boiler can cater the needs of 2 different zones. But you don't even want to take a look at the option, much like other cities do. Other cities, I haven't seen this practice carried out elsewhere. Hawkesbury is dealing with a separate building. Mr. Lalonde, if we had 30% less, as you stated, I just rely as to reports content. Well, let's say 30%. Now, if we don't put up the wall and the UCPR says, well, never mind, we're not going to occupy this building. Have we even presented them with this option? I'm sure that if we were to accept this option, that they'd back out. They're assuming the cost without even thinking of this option that I'm coming up with. Mr. Mayor, we're potentially talking about saving close to $3 million in construction costs. I don't see that number. Did you happen to have numbers for us on that? I know we talked about this very briefly, but I'm not sure. You don't have the plan with you? No, I'm afraid we don't have that. No, they had 2 busy days this week, especially on Monday. But look, you cannot save 30%. Even if you save 20 or 25%, you won't, but we'll make money long term because they're going to pay to be there. That's the whole point. I think it's important to remind Council that at one point in time, paramedics were based in the Rockland Fire Hall. They left the Rockland Fire Hall because that cooperative venture was not working out for them. It's important to remember that when we compare or try to compare stations that we're discussing tonight with other centers are single-level municipalities that don't have an upper-tier piece, such as the City of Ottawa, such as the City of Barrie. We have an upper-tier municipality and a lower-tier municipality that are talking about putting up 2 different employers, 2 different groups of employees who potentially share living space. Historically, that has not worked out very well. I've had a lengthy conversation with a number of chiefs in Ottawa today, and in urban centers, they have a wall much as what we've proposed, and that works reasonably well. In rural areas, they've tried co-joining it. The biggest challenge that those services are facing is the cost of control around VMS staff. Firefighters continuously report at the same station. They take pride in ownership. They keep the facility clean and tidy and look after everything in there. When EMS are constantly revolving or evolving, or different staff is called in to cover, then there's no shared ownership of that building. You know, a paramedic is stationed in Rockland for the day, and the rest of the time they work in Vankleek-Hill. Vankleek-Hill, L'Orignal tried to partner, and the information that I received today from those chiefs is that they're struggling. It's not that it's an impossibility, it's just that there's friction. There are different mindsets between the two groups. Although we can function well at an emergency scene, well, you see, that's the thing to me. You function perfectly together in a crisis situation, flooding, accident, or whatever. But for some reason, firefighters and paramedics can't live together in one single building. And Mr. Chrétien has mentioned the same thing. To me, it doesn't work when they're together. I know. That's how things are. Well, Mr. Mayor, we have to look on a long term, because we have to build. It won't be the same situation in Clarence Creek because you won't have the EMS down there. But down the road, there's another station coming down for Rockland. In 10, 15 years, I'm not sure. It'll depend on growth. But still, the fact that we have the capacity to borrow doesn't mean that we have to borrow on big ticket items like that just because that's the way it's always been. I completely agree with you. But what big ticket item are you referring specifically with this? The wall to separate EMS? You're stuck on the wall. It's the entire size of the project, but they need the bays just like the other ones do. You know, the bays don't change. You have 5 doors. You'll have 5 doors. That won't change. It's just that the part that's on, if you want a picture, if the part that's on the right-hand side gets mixed in with the part on the left-hand side. But you're not going to save much money from one lousy wall in the middle of the two. It's a cement block. Up it goes. I'm trying to explain myself. You're explaining yourself. I understand. But the washroom, for example, the facilities you're going to need for all the staff, as the chief has stated, people, they don't give a damn because if it's dirty or the paper on the floor, but the firefighters will want to have some pride in their fire station. They're going to have a battle. Why? Have a battle, not fix the problem before we get there, especially for a tenant. But if you're a citizen that looks at that plan and knows how to count, we'll ask you, why did you not put them together? And the answer you're going to give them seriously is that, well, they don't get along, so we have to pay an additional $1 million. No, it's because they're a tenant. They pay rent to be there. It's not a tenant issue, Mario. It's a culture issue between the two associations. Well, you and I have to work together, but we wouldn't live together. It's the same thing. But we don't fight over the same resources, Mario. But what I'm saying, if I was to pay you to live in your own room, I wouldn't want you to live in my living room. I would want to have my own. Well, we can go back to all new stations. All new stations, those being built around Ottawa, didn't have any towers or hose towers anymore because they're reverting to rubber hoses. And we're asking for a hose tower. Well, there are different ways of approaching this. One of the challenges is maintenance of the equipment and longevity of equipment. The discussions with Ottawa is a bit of both. My commission with their chief is that I was led to believe that they've decided to stick with jacketed hoses and not rubber hoses. There's an ease factor also because typically I can load rubber hoses right back on the truck wet. Though one of these issues that Ottawa has tried to address by switching to rubber hoses was the fact that they didn't have to dry them and have volunteers come back and roll them at some point in time. Most fire services continue to stay with jacketed hoses. There's a couple of reasons for that. One is the longevity and the lifespan of that hose is better than rubber, and the other piece of that is the drag coefficient. When you have to wind through a house, rubber is much more difficult to drag around carpets or door frames, or the case may be, but a jacketed hose will drag easier. So from a jacketed hose, it tends to be easier to advance to the house, and it means that there's a bit of maintenance in order to get the full line span out of that hose. The maintenance is that we need to dry it so that we don't get any mildew into the jacketed cover. Again, the lifespan in conversations with our peers in Ottawa, their view of things, well, my take of that discussion is that they regret putting in those hoses in. It's just a matter of volunteers, loading it easily back on the truck. But at the end of the day, is that they wish they would have built those towers. There's a significant cost of trying to convert over to rubber. That's saying there are other options to dry out your hoses. The tower is not the only option, but it's the only cost effective over time based on square footage, based on foundation stuff. It's not all that big. It's high. You have a height issue, but the foundation, the footprint of that tower is not all that big. But when we visit stations in Embrun and Limoges, the two fire chiefs seem to have opposite thoughts on that. Even Limoges swears by the traditional hose, whereby Embrun is switching everything to rubber hoses. Both of them were really adamant on their arguments, which was confusing for us. Well, there are different opinions for everything out there, with regards to colors of trucks, to types of hoses. Mr. Zet, I just want to say that what Mr. Lalonde and Mr. Balinguette says about the amount of money it's going to cost us. I agree with Mr. Lalonde, where we have an amount room to borrow money, but we have to obviously build fire stations because the other ones are obsolete. So, is there a way to build one now, delay the other one in a couple of years? Do we have that capacity or ability? Because to build two right off the bat, that entails a lot of money. These are big ticket items. I don't think we're going to get any bigger ticket items than this. Is there a different way to go about doing this? Well, the first thing is that the ambulance, well, you see, we need to build the Bourget venue because that's where they needed it before. Why don't we build Bourget first and then we can get to Rockland next? We have options right now. I don't think that we should feel that this is it. This is our only option. We need two. We need them now. We need to start tomorrow. There are always options out there. I want to give them the tools that they need, but we cannot just go out and take a $10 million chunk out of debt with everything that we've done in this term that we've borrowed. We're getting to a point where it's going to start to sting. Councillor Lalonde, I had a few questions. Dave, if you want to leave, you've got a long drive. No, I'm having too much fun here. I don't want to leave. I'm having too much fun. Okay. All right. You got a short drive then. All right. Oh, was that it? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Right. I think you're reading. All right, Mr. Lalonde. Well, first of all, I just want to say that I did follow up on what's being raised. I got all of the information about the new Pembroke Fire Hall. It was awarded to Pomerleau, quite cheaper than ours here and bigger. And when we say that the cost is $4 million and something for Rockland, you have to put the incentive on top of that, don't you? They don't call it incentive. Let's say they call it contingencies, incidentals. Those are built in the quoted price. All right. So of the $10.3 million, we look at the high level. Of the $10.3 million, you have $1 million built in as contingencies. So you want us to add $1 million on top of that, then? Yes. Well, that's over $700,000. It's the 10.3 million includes the $500,000 we spent on the land. All right. Now that 10.3 million is an all-in number. Everything, all of the money that we spent getting the Pilon property, everything is included in there. So of the $10.3 million, you have $1 million for contingency. Now, the effort that's been made in the last 2 months to go through the actual cost of the fire station requires a huge amount of heavy lifting and looking at the cost of keeping the existing station and how we can best utilize that space. We had consultants come in and do a proper building assessment to make sure that if we wanted to keep that building, it was not a bad decision. We've had an assessment done, not an in-depth assessment done. When the first asset management plan was tackled in 2014, we have good information. We can keep the building, looking at the cost of what it was going to take to renovate that building, and look into cheaper options. So in terms of can we phase it, in terms of delaying the Rockland station or delaying the Bourget station, if we delay the Bourget station, the paramedics will go and look for a solution elsewhere. Not that, well, we can start with the Bourget station. Yes, we could start with the Bourget station. If we had to pick which station needs replacing the most, it would be the Rockland station. But you understand what I mean when we say 10,000 or $10 million is a hard pill to swallow. Yes, I do. And with regard to the $10 million, you are seeing that the impact on the ratepayer is not fully $10 million, because a chunk of that, when you pare down the actual tax impact to the ratepayer, it's less than 1%. Because of that $10 million that you borrow, you're going to have development charges making the debt payment, and United Counties of Prescott Russell will be paying their share. They're going to be giving us the money to make the loan payment, so we're not going to be taxing our ratepayers. So of that rental amount, and you've given me direction to go out and negotiate with the UCPR, that pays for the full cost of the United Counties portion. So we're looking at the debt portion for the 2 fire stations. 60% of that will be paid for through development charges revenue. So when we collect that revenue, we take it out to make a debt payment. So the actual impact when we give it back to the ratepayer is less than 1%. Well, your report states 1.25. It does, but we had a discussion in the back room. Yes, at the closed meeting. And we cleared up a few matters, but it's $10 million. It's a $10 million amount. There are other factors as well. The environmental master plan is going to cost another percent. Don't even get me started on this. Mr. Lalonde has not yet finished. I'm sorry. Councillor Zant, continue on. I'm trying to amalgamate both together without having the wall. I don't agree with that either. But one thing that I do agree with, I don't think that we need the size of paramedic building facilities that we're showing here, because now we're showing spaces for 4 ambulances. And right now we're going to have a new paramedic station in Bourget. So right now we have 2 ambulances in Landry. And what's the size of the building in Landry? It's about, it only houses 2 ambulances. But right now, we're going to have ambulances in Bourget, which we don't have in Bourget, plus the one in Rockland that's not been paid for. Well, the other one is not full-time. It's only during the daytime, and it's only for 1 ambulance. They're the ones asking for that square footage, and they're paying per square footage. They're the ones asking for that? Yeah, that's what they have in Hawkesbury, and it's actually not a bad thing. We're expecting another 2,400 more homes to be built in the next 5 years. I have no problems to build the futures regards to, well, when you look in the future, you can look at provisions in the future to extend the building afterwards. It's only cost you a bit more to prolong those walls there. Yes, but they're paying by square footage, so it would cost a bit more, to proceed the way this Mr. Lalonde is proposing we go about doing this. Well, really, Andre, you would have difficulty in pairing both of those together because they don't have two separate training rooms. They don't have any classrooms. So if I take a look at the design right now, nothing is doubled, save it except the bathroom, washroom facilities. Well, the point I was making was this, is that your washroom, well, I'm sorry, the major space that is referred to as a training room. They can perform their training there. There's a type of false wall they wish to build there. You can build in a lounge. What I'm saying is that you can maximize space. I'm sure that the paramedics will be able to make use of the firefighters' classroom facilities. Again, just something on the AMS vehicles. The challenge that we face today in Clarence and Rockland is that we have two ambulances in our municipality that are both used during the day. There's no capacity to store spare vehicles here. So the EMS discussions that I've had, they either need to expand facilities on Landry to house additional vehicles or looking at other options. Now, the initial discussions that I've had with the EMS chief, Michel Caritier, was a request for 4, with a possibility to expand to 6 potential vehicles in Rockland at some point down the road. So keep in mind that this includes a rapid response vehicle, an SUV that goes around with 1 paramedic. And when that person wants to travel around, wants a place to park a vehicle, that it has a place. So if that supervisor needs to go around and speak to the crew in Bourget, for example, that's why they asked for the space in Bourget, where they had to have an ambulance supervisor's vehicle parked on the side. They could have a conversation there. The same rule would apply to Rockland. They'd have an ambulance parked there. They'd have a stair built around there. Anyways, I'd had a chance Tuesday to visit some fire stations in Ottawa, and I was surprised when they told me that they were building 3 new fire stations in Orleans, and they're all 2-bay stations. I can understand if you had many stations, but 4 bays, I thought that was enough. Well, you might have misunderstood me before. I'm not saying that we should postpone Bourget before we finalize negotiations with the United Guys of Prescott and Russell. What I've suggested is that I don't want to approve construction of a new station in Bourget, whether until we have the okay from the United Counties. As far as I'm concerned, we only need to approve to look at the need for a new fire station in Bourget if we get the UCPR's okay. If not, let's concentrate on Rockland, on our needs in Rockland. I suggest the following. If we do get an agreement for ambulances in Bourget, then obviously we need to go ahead and do something there. One of the things that if we go ahead there and spend $4 million in Rockland and $3 million in Bourget, in a couple of years we'll be asking for another $2 or $3 million for Clarence Creek to build that station. The reason we have Clarence Creek is that the radius of Bourget and Rockland do not overlap. There's a gap there. That's the only reason that this Clarence Creek station exists. So rather than rebuild 3 stations in the next 5 years or whatever, if we have to rebuild the station in Bourget, why not move it up? Move it a couple of kilometers to the north so that it does overlap Rockland and we don't need the Clarence Creek station anymore. So through the mayor, as a result of the fire master plan study, they did a fire station location analysis, and what the fire master plan recommended were the location of the 3 fire stations as presented at present. There are considerations that go into that. Part of that is that when we're trying to target volunteer firefighters, we're talking about preparedness to determine where volunteers reside, how long it takes for them to get to the station, get into the truck, and respond to the bulk of the calls. Typically, we're talking about Bourget and Clarence Creek percentage-wise, we're going to get more calls at those villages. So we want to have the quickest response times we can. If volunteers are responding from a central location in the village, responding to a call at the village, then we're going to get a quicker response time. As we go to remote stations, we have an increased response time. So there's a number of considerations that go into that, which is a different equation when you're staffing a part-time station with part-time partners. But 10% of your firefighters must reside in Rockland proper, because that's where the local population is. We have 30 here, we have 40 in Clarence Creek, and 20 in Bourget that live in those areas. Correct. Now, in the Bourget area and in Clarence Creek, there are some that live out in Hammond, but the majority live in Bourget. Why don't we just, if we were to move the station, we would still be closer to Bourget than in Clarence Creek. If we located between the two, they could cater to both. Well, both of your villages, what about Cheney and Hammond? Well, if you move the Bourget station north, that radius overlaps. Well, and you can tell the people in Bourget or in Clarence Creek that you're going to close their station, their fire station. Good luck on that. Well, we're combining. Yeah, but you're going to be out of the village in any event. Mrs. Collier. Well, one of the other factors that makes the Bourget plan attractive is that we actually own the land in Bourget, where we're proposing to put up a station, and it makes it somewhat more affordable. We have not built into the plan what we could get for the fire station current, assuming it becomes surplus property. Well, if we get the UCPR contract, we renovate the Bourget fire station, but there's no land to renovate there. Well, you're turning existing facilities, fire station facilities, you convert them into ambulance facilities. Look, we have a property here in Rockland. Did we look at a 3-bay facility, what the cost could be? In my report, well, that's why, yes, if you'll find my report in there, and I did come up with a schematic of what's in all of those bays. So there's a bit of a description as to why we went that way. One of the things that we face in Rockland is that we have 4 fire apparatus in that hall today. Those 4 fire apparatus respond first to calls, depending on the nature of the call. So any one of those 4 trucks may need to go out the door first. And that's one of the challenges we face today, is that if the call comes in for X, we may have to move a vehicle out of the way to then take the truck would take first to initiate a call, which slows down our response call this time. So there's an appeal for having 4 bays. The reality is that I could come to you folks and ask for 4 full drive-through bays, because we just can't justify the square footage. We try to consolidate as best we can. So if we look at that schematic that we've done, the 2 trailers, we're proposing to sell the generator that's currently in Saint Pascal because we haven't used it. In my opinion, it's surplus. And then in my opinion, that leaves us with 2 trailers that we need to store in Rockland that need to be parked side by side in 1 bay. The other spots are all taken. Anything's possible. But what I would suggest is, I guess, especially if we're going to look at future growth, we don't have a tanker or water tanker in Rockland. We have 2 in the municipality, 1 in Clarence Creek, 1 in Bourget. Yet Rockland does service areas that are not protected by a hydrant. But we might look at having a tanker in Rockland at some point. The more we limit space, we will limit our options down the road. If we're projecting a 50-year down the road plan or more, we might look into that. Okay, so let's vote on this. Who's in favor? Well, I would like to. Can we wait to obtain an answer from the United Counties of Presque-Isle before moving on this? Is there a reason why Mr. Lalonde has brought up the point that there's a $50 or $60 difference on a per square foot basis as to what's being proposed here as opposed to Pembroke. Well, we have the consultant involved in this situation is the same company that assessed the Pembroke Station venue. Well, we're also involved in that project as well. We're having. You'd have to come to the speaker, sir. I think the TV doesn't get you if you don't speak up there. Well, it doesn't record on TV, and tonight's session is recorded. So Pembroke is $318 per square foot. So if you look at our report on page 7, okay, $318.33 per square foot. It has a square footage of 16,390 square foot, which is bigger than what's being budgeted in Rockland, and that totals about $5 million for that project. Did you say 300 or 200? $318.33 per square foot. Okay, what's ours? We're at $304.27 per square foot, and that has a 10% contingency fee. I've gone very aggressive with our budgets because I know that money was tight, very conservative, very tight. I've adopted a very tight position. I assume that we're going to get better pricing than what they've obtained in Pembroke because I think that some of our local guys here are going to go very aggressive. Embrun, Limoges, the numbers will be lower, so I've gone with lower estimates. But who knows? Who knows what prices will come in when they do come in? But I can tell you that they'll be lower in $4.3 million lower in Pembroke. In your opinion, is there an advantage of going with the two together? No. You'll get a better price if you get more volume, a larger contract to build this. You will get a better price. Not a huge difference, like maybe a couple of dollars per square foot, having a bigger contract. Let me just suggest that maybe we can put down as a condition that we obtain the UCPR's response first before going. I'm sorry, could you repeat that? We approve this upon condition that we obtain the UCPR ambulance services, which means they don't start doing anything before we get that. Okay. Okay then. All right, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to revisit the resolution that states that we're looking at a joint EMS firefighting services building. The resolution states that, yeah, at the very end, you're going to say all of this is pending EMS negotiations. But if we're not taking into account the EMS services, then this resolution is void. So we're covered. So EMS. So if EMS doesn't join, then this resolution is dead. I know that you can, if we need to cut down on the square footage for the Rockland station, and if we have space available at 1516 Laurier or to house, or here to house the bylaw guys, for example, is there an opportunity to cut down a little bit more on your square footage, specifically for the areas that were identified for bylaw? Because we're still talking about building $304 per square foot for space that we have plenty of in our current buildings. I guess it's always a possibility. You're correct. Council may have space in other facilities, whether it be here or at Town Hall. One of the challenges, again, to reiterate, is that we have shared admin. We share our admin assistant. We're at different locations. You also share a director. We share a director. We share an admin. That leads to either travel time or inefficiencies spent trying to access the admin, or process whatever that creates challenges. It's not to say that it's impossible. On the bylaw side, we've significantly reduced the size of the bylaw space from what was originally proposed. In the original square footage, my bylaw manager has done a really great job in saying we want those bylaw officers on the road rather than the office. It's just that 1560 Laurier is not, it's a 5-minute walk. It's not like a half-hour drive from you just to consult on files. I'm guessing that that's why you want it closer by to deal with specific situations. Well, we talk on a daily basis. You know, they drop by my office to brief me on what councils want on any particular issue. So we speak probably several times a day when we're passing by. And if we were in separate facilities, we don't have it's not as easy to facilitate cooperation. Now, if we can avoid the split, I would certainly encourage that. I hate to lose building space. If we're short on building space, it would be a new story. It's not as if you're taking up a whole lot of new room. You see, part of the challenge will be as well in the floor plan that's been presented. The bylaw space will be in the old building. So we're not building new space for bylaw. The question is, could you have something over there? What could you build something over there that would impact building size, action, and layout? I think that we've tried to meet council's needs as best that we could. Hearing comments that came out of the council meeting of June the 5th, we've tried our best to accommodate that. Again, I would strongly recommend that if you want to keep the department together, to have all facilities under one roof might be a step forward. Well, we do have negotiations in there. Finally, the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council delegate the Chief Administrative Officer the authority to negotiate with the United Counties of Prescott and Russell the contingent sale of the EMS. So it's in there already. So we have to get that before we can go ahead. All right? I just wanted to ask him one more question. Yeah, one question. When I was up to visit the industrial road, the fire station, they have 3 bays, but they're all parked one behind the others. So 3 bays would not suffice? Would not be sufficient for us? Well, the challenge, Councillor, is that right now we're using our other vehicles, like the vehicle that I drive carries a medical bag in it with drugs and defib and all of that in there. Those things cannot freeze. The other issue is that if you park it outside in the wintertime, you need to brush snow out of the vehicle before you go to a call. In terms of efficiency of our operations, I mean, what we've proposed is something that fits everything in. If you keep comparing us to Ottawa, maybe putting in a spare vehicle in the base, it's not an upfront vehicle. It's a different comparison to what we're talking about here in Rockland, where we need to have those vehicles available to respond immediately to calls. Currently, we have to shuffle vehicles to go to calls. Depending on the nature of the calls, it slows down our response. You've mentioned also that employees' cars be parked inside. No, car one, the vehicle that I drive for work, has medical equipment in it that's susceptible to freezing. But they say that none of them can be parked inside. Last question. Ms. Collier. Well, as you know, I've got quite a few years of experience working for the Ottawa Service, Fire Service, and your Ottawa Service, the Ottawa Industrial, is actually the training center. That's near the Costco. You know, the training given at the fire station, the 3 bays that are there in Ottawa, close to the Costco Center, is servicing a fairly small area of the trucks that are parked at the back is for training purposes, as well as the trucks in the parking because the training center is right behind. I'm very familiar with that. Yes, they can park their trucks behind in the summertime, but not in the winter time. That's what we do in the Bourget also. We'd be using the same thing, doing the same thing in Bourget. All those in favor? Carried then. Thank you. Any other items? Can I be allowed 1 or 2 quickies before we call it at night? Mr. Desnoyers or Mr. Keogh, in the budget coming up, I would like to actually have a discussion as to how much it would cost the municipality to start accepting credit cards. We've had a lot of things that we can do to improve systems, that we could only rent ice time through our system. We need credit cards. I know it costs money to the municipality. I'd like to know approximately what those amounts would be so we can take a decision on that. Second, we've had a lot of accidents at the entrance of the Clarence and Rockland Arena on Highway 17. Too many to count. And I would like to know if before the Junior A's get here and the thing fills up and we're going to have even more accidents, we have 2 other entrance points to go into the Clarence and Rockland Arena. If somebody could commit to close that entrance. If people can come in by cutoff, we have arrows. And the new subdivision, that's right there right now, the EQ Homes has access to the back parking lot. But the other homes on Conon have no access because they have a do not enter sign put up there. Well, our manager for planning is preparing a report as we speak because our director of protective services have attended the scenes of many accidents themselves. The conditions associated with CIH and other venues are looked into and reflected in the report that we and will be contained the report that we submitted to you. Not at the next meeting, but the meeting after. But we're talking about our entrance to our arena, right? The CIH. I was alluding to a lot of accidents occurring. Yeah. No, actually, it's a county road. It's on a county road, but that entrance is our entrance to the arena. It's not the CIH. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, that will be explained in the report. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing this. Mr. Lalonde, any questions, Councillor Lalonde? Oh, it's too late. It's too late. I forgot all about it. I won't ask twice. No other questions? Adjournment called at 11 p.m. Thank you.